Would you all jump aboard the elevator with me? Jamie's left us with the elevator ambassador sermon today. There is a famous story about the rabbi Hillel, who lived and taught in the 1st century BCE and who was considered perhaps the greatest Torah scholar of all time. Rabbi Hillel was particularly known for getting at the meaning behind the text. According to the website Shabbat.org, his simple message for his disciples was to love peace and pursue peace, love all God's creations, and bring them close to the Torah. Well, one day, the story goes, there was a certain Gentile, a non-Jewish man who was interested in converting to Judaism, but he wanted to fast-track this. So he went to Rabbi Shammai, who was the other famous rabbi at that time, and he said, I will convert to Judaism if you can teach me all of the Torah while I stand on one foot. And Rabbi Shammai, insulted, says, get this joker out of here, and they had the guy thrown out. Well, the guy dusts himself off, and he goes to Rabbi Hillel and makes the same offer. I will convert to Judaism if you can teach me the Torah while I stand on one foot. And Rabbi Hillel watches with amusement as the man gets up on one foot, and Hillel says, whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go and study it. The man is amazed, and thus began his conversion. Well, religions are notoriously slippery things to get at. A religion may sometimes be expressed as a body of explicit teachings, but its meaning is also captured through traditions, through rituals. It is stored and transmitted through physical objects and memories and stories passed down through generations. The 7 principles are part of the meaning of Unitarian Universalism, but so is lighting a candle or bringing water to the water communion service or the teal hymnal. The meanings of religions don't stay put very well. A religion is the lived experience of all the people who have come before, but its meaning is being continuously redefined by the people who come after. It's very hard to say what a religion is. Nonetheless, many religions have sayings or scriptures that are pointed to as particularly capturing the essence of that religion's teaching. Hillel located the essence of Judaism in what is now called the Golden Rule. Judaism also has this passage in Deuteronomy, which contains this fundamental theological teaching. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And then there are the teachings of the prophet Micah. He has shown you, O mortal, what is required of you. And it is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Christianity has that famous passage of John 3:16, familiar from so many professional football broadcasts, which reads, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believe in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." But Jesus himself offered this summary of his teachings, which Christians call the Great Commandment. Love God with all your heart and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Islam has its 5 pillars, which encompass its central teaching about God and Muhammad, and the ethical and religious requirements around charity, prayer, pilgrimage, and fasting. Buddhism has the Four Noble Truths, which describe the problem of human suffering, and the Eightfold Path, which is its solution. In all these cases, the religions are being summarized either in the form of their teachings, their commandments, or as statements of beliefs or rules for correct observance. What do we do then when we get to Unitarian Universalism, which doesn't exactly have teachings, definitely doesn't have commandments, doesn't specify beliefs, and doesn't have required rules of observance? What is that? Is it even a religion? Indeed, some Unitarian Universalists would shy away from that word, preferring to describe our tradition as a philosophy or a movement. We don't intend to open that debate today, but the point is religions are slippery to describe, and Unitarian Universalism is slipperier than some. Many Unitarian Universalists find it hard to describe just what this religion is about, especially when talking to people who are used to thinking about religion in terms of beliefs, rules, or teachings. That brings us to the elevator challenge. You get on an elevator, a hotel elevator with a total stranger, and you both press for the top floor. He happens to notice the UUI chalice keychain proudly displayed on your luggage. And he says, "What's that?" And you say, "Well, it's from my church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Indianapolis." And he says, "Unitarian Universalist? I never heard of that. What is that?" And now you've got until the elevator reaches the top floor to explain to this person what Unitarian Universalism is. What do you say? This is your UU elevator speech. This is your opportunity to be an elevator ambassador for Unitarian Universalism and UUI. Of course, as you know, this can happen anywhere. So today we're going to talk about how we talk about Unitarian Universalism, or don't talk about it. Now, what people will default to when talking about Unitarian Universalism, and especially when talking about their Unitarian Universalist church, is to talk about first about what it's not. Someone might say, well, it's a church, but it's not like a church. It's different. And that impulse maybe comes from a desire not to be misleading or to be misidentified. If you say you go to a church, many people will naturally assume you mean a Christian church. And there may be a whole host of assumptions that come with that. I've heard UU ministers who are, of course, deeply proud of their religious identity say they feel that same temptation to say about themselves, "I'm a pastor, but I'm not like a pastor." Because there's a lot of assumptions about what it means to lead a church, and there's a lot of assumptions about what it means to go to a church. Some UUs don't even like to use the word church. They may describe themselves as a UU congregation, a fellowship, or a society. But UUI, like many, probably most, use the term church. So you say, it's a church, but it's not like a church. And then you follow with, because it's a little hard to explain, it's even just plain hard to say. By the time you just say Unitarian Universalism, you've probably already gone up another floor on the elevator. So now precious seconds are ticking away. And what you've communicated so far to your interested and captive audiences is that it's not a church, and it's hard to explain. Which are true things to say, but I would guess most people experience these statements as somewhat distancing. I would suggest starting instead with something like, I love it. Unitarian Universalism, I've never heard of it. What's that? Oh, I love it. It's so interesting. It's this amazing church. Many people could honestly lead with, it changed my life. And some might even say, it saved my life. Now, it's possible that the idea of leading with something like that makes you uncomfortable. You may be wondering, why do we have to talk about this at all? Should we be talking about this? Many UUs, and not for no reason, are deeply suspicious of or allergic to anything that smacks of religious proselytizing, of pushing their religion on their beliefs on other people. You've had people push their beliefs on you, and maybe there was a lot of guilt tripping that went with that, or shame, or other forms of pressure. And the message was that you have to believe or you're a bad person, or you're going to be divinely punished, or whatever it was, and you want no part of that. UUs have such a great respect in general for the rights of people to have their own beliefs. So UUs don't evangelize. Don't try to convert people. Don't push their beliefs or insist we have access to the one truth. And for many UUs, that translates into a level of discomfort for talking about their own religious tradition in a way that invites people into it, in a way that says, this is important to me and it might be important to you. And that discomfort is understandable. But here's the thing we hear at UUI all the time. We hear people come to our church or come to this religion and say, I had no idea this kind of church was possible. Where has this been all my life? Or, this has always been the way I felt about religion, but I didn't know there was a name for it. And I didn't know there were other people who felt the same way. Or, I wish I'd known about this religion 10 years ago. It isn't proselytizing to just say, I really love my church. And it may be inviting someone into something they've been looking for a very long time, possibly without even knowing it. Meanwhile, back at the elevator, remember the elevator? We've said it's not a church. It's hard to explain. The next thing that is usually said is something to the effect of, it's a church where you can believe whatever you want. That statement is trying to get at something important about Unitarian Universalism. We are a free faith tradition and have been going all the way back to our founding. After all, we were heretics. Unitarianism was started by Christians who wanted to be able to read the Bible and draw their own conclusions. Imagine that. William Ellery Channing, one of the great early framers of American Unitarianism, had an utter hatred of creeds, of frozen and fixed recitations of truth that told people what they must believe if they wanted to belong. In his appropriately titled letter called A Letter on Creeds, he wrote, Who does not see that human creeds, setting bounds to thought and telling us where all inquiry must stop, tend to repress the holy zeal for truth, to shut our eyes on new illumination, and to hem us within the beaten paths, and finally to arrest that perpetual progress which is the life and glory of an immortal mind. The Universalists also insisted on broad latitude for individual belief. Hosea Ballou said, "If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good." Unitarians and Universalists, as we expanded over time to become more and more theologically diverse, welcoming in first non-Christians, and then humanists, atheists, agnostics, and then people from a wide variety of Eastern-influenced, neo-pagan, earth-based, and eco-feminist spiritualities, we have never deviated from that free faith tradition. In the words of the great 16th century Unitarian minister, Francis David, words which are almost certainly apocryphal, we say that we need not think alike to love alike. This idea that it is the church where you can believe whatever you want is trying to get at something important about our religious tradition, that it is first and foremost a free thought tradition. And there is certainly something that captures the imagination about a church where Christians, atheists, Buddhists, pagans, skeptics, goddess worshipers, and Bob, who doesn't know what he believes and doesn't need a label for it, thank you very much. A church where all these people can sit side by side and worship together, can grow and learn from one another, can experience something life-affirming and beautiful together, can support each other through laughter and tears, can work to build a better world together. There is something about that captures the imagination. There is something about that is noble and beautiful. But just to say you can believe whatever you want doesn't quite get at that. You can also believe whatever you want in a bowling alley or at home in the privacy of your living room. So what is it that brings us out of our living room and into a place like this? Unitarian Universalism has never been just about or primarily about a lack of orthodoxy. There are deep themes here interwoven throughout our history, reflecting the best of our thought and experience. Unitarians have always held a strong belief in human goodness and in the promise of the human spirit. We believe in the power of reason, science, and education. We believe in human equality and in the democratic spirit. Universalists, who were always a little more skeptical about human goodness and a little more realistic about human propensity to make mistakes and do wrong, believed in a God of love who unfailingly embraced all, which in time became a belief that there is a love, wherever you think it comes from, that can transform and heal this world. Both believed that religion was not some other worldly concern, but that it should motivate us to act in the here and now, to inform our own behavior towards our fellow human beings, and to change and reform human institutions. We sometimes say religion should first and foremost be about life before death. That belief has inspired generations of Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists to take risks and make sacrifices, working for justice for all people. You can scarcely name an area of social progress in the last 200 years where a UU was not deeply involved. From a different direction, our transcendentalist ancestors, people like Emerson and Thoreau, brought into our religious thought a strong experiential component, a belief that spirituality is not just something we think, but it's something we encounter in ourselves and in the world. They taught us that there is wisdom in all the world's religions and that the divine is all around us, especially in nature. Picking up these themes much later, feminist thinkers and deep ecologists and people from pagan and earth-centered traditions drew our attention to the deep interconnectedness of life and of our interdependence with the web of creation, which is not only one of our deepest religious ideas, but it's also one of the most vitally relevant in this time of climate change and ecological collapse. These ideas, these themes woven through our history are not orthodoxies. Today they're reflected in our 7 principles and 6 sources, which, as you know from David Jackaway's sermon last Sunday, are currently being reconsidered by Unitarian Universalists. That is how much they are not orthodoxy. We are required to reconsider them every generation. The 7 principles are not statements of belief per se, and they are not requirements for membership. The 7 principles represent the most recent expression of our collective commitment to how we say we want to be in this world. They are a covenant freely entered into. A part of that commitment is to working out together in freedom what these principles mean, how we understand them, and how we think they should best be lived out. And we will all have our own individual take on that, but those principles and the witness of our history and our tradition speak with a strong voice as well. This is a place where you can believe what you want, but where you should also expect to have your beliefs continuously tested and challenged against our core commitment to reason, freedom, justice, and love. This is a place where you can come to be inspired and lifted up and energized and ennobled by these collective commitments to reason, freedom, justice, and love. So what is it about that tradition, about this living tradition we call Unitarian Universalism, that speaks to you? The elevator speech is really the time to share what UU has meant for you personally. Not what it is in some academic sense, but what it is for you in your heart and in your life. Because that person can always Google the facts about Unitarian Universalism whenever they want. You have a chance to tell them something true about Unitarian Universalism for you. There was a challenge on the internet a few years back called 6-Word Stories of Faith. And the challenge was for people to use just 6 words to describe the meaning of their faith for themselves, and then to tweet it out. People participated from all kinds of religious and theological backgrounds. For example, a science fiction author, Stephen Baxter, writing from a humanist perspective, shared Big Bang, no God, fade out, end. An anonymous Jewish person shared, born Jewish, discovered bacon, still Jewish. Some UUs got in the game. Here are some 6-word stories of faith they shared. Love radically, serve gratefully, wonder daily. Robin Shaw. Here's another. It really is all a miracle. Victoria Weinstein. Love wins. Be on its team. Lee Pexula. And the last of the Unitarians. Held by love, I unlearn fear. Reverend Sean Dennison. To get us thinking about what UU means to us in a simple way, suitable for sharing in an elevator, I'm going to encourage you to think about your own 6-word story of faith, however you understand it, including if you don't use the word faith to describe yourself at all. If you're new to UU or don't identify as UU, I invite you to think about whatever your own tradition or your own journey means to you. If you're feeling inspired, you can think of one now, maybe write it out on your bulletin or put it in the chat on Zoom, or you can share them during coffee hour. Let me summarize. We have a message that many people want to hear, that there can be a community of deep ethical and spiritual commitment that inspires, challenges, and sustains us, that allows us freedom to question and explore and to grow, that respects ancient wisdom and modern science, and that holds up a vision of hope and peace grounded in the power of transforming love. Let us not be reluctant to share that message, but rather let us widen the circle of our community and invite others in. That is how we keep moving our living tradition forward into the future, by inviting new people to join us on this journey. Thank you, Jamie.